Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Books to Last podcast. This week we are joined by Angela from Pooled Ink Reviews. We had a really fun discussion about some great fantasy books, so much so I've actually already read one of them since recording. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Angela. Thank you for joining us, the Books to Last podcast. How are you feeling today?
Good. Doing all right.
Always.
How about you?
Yeah, really good. I've heard it sort of said that in these sort of times, just being good and generally okay, all things considered, best we can all hope for. It's really, and things seem to be maybe getting better. So yeah, we'll get there eventually. But yeah, no, I'm having a pretty good day. What are you reading at the moment? Just because I am being a very bad reader and not reading anything because I finished a book and then didn't start another one.
I have a couple I'm trying to read right now, but just for one that I think maybe more people be familiar with is the new Akatar book by Sarah J. Maas.
Oh, I don't know why I looked behind me to the bookshelves because I don't have it. It's a Court of Silver Flames, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Brain blank. So yeah, trying to read that. It's going weirdly slow for me. Don't know why.
Are you a big fan of the series? I know Sarah J. Maas is an acquired taste, as some people say.
Yeah, I mean, I liked I guess the original trilogy part of it. I will say, I enjoyed book one, I enjoyed book two a lot, and then book three was not my favorite of the three. And then there was that novella she snuck in there, and that was kind of whatever. And then now we're on this book, which is more Nesta, and I don't know. I'm trying to, I remember being really into this series, so I'm trying to stick with it, but maybe I'm a bit of a mood reader, so.
Yeah. I think it's always a bit risky when if an author's had a successful trilogy, it's always a bit of a risky move to come back to it years later, even if it is to sort of I get the idea from all the screaming I've seen on Twitter that that Nesta is a fan favorite character. I haven't read A Court of Thorns and Roses. I've read Throne of Glass, all but the last book. So I read all but the last book of the Throne of Glass series, and I never got around to A Court of Thorns and Roses. But yeah, I think it's always a bit risky when they come back to it. Suzanne Collins did the same thing with Hunger Games recently, and
yeah, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes or something.
Yeah, another one that I have but haven't read because it's weird with series like that. I think you get very sort of into the world, and then once you're taken out of the world, it's kind of hard to come back to it so many years later.
Yeah.
So
sometimes I just feel like they have such a good so much success, and they're like, oh, how can I keep it going? And sometimes it just needs to end. So I see that a lot in TV, particularly. That's not books, but when the show goes and you can tell at the point where it needed to end, but they're just trying to drag it out and it just gets worse, and you're like, eh.
Yeah, it's very much like a quit while you're ahead kind of thing. I think with book series especially, when they're well written, the author had a map in their head of where the story was going to go and what was going to happen. And that might change and develop over time, but usually once that sort of is all done, it feels good to just leave it there.
Yeah.
But some people manage it successfully and they write sequels to series that have been finished for ages and they do really, really well. So you never know, maybe A Court of Silver Flames will pick up and blow you away by the end.
Yes.
Always what we can hope for. I don't know what it's because there's so many books that I want to read at the moment that I can't pick just one to just start, and I know I just need to just start one.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, it's just I'm trying to figure out because I'm also a mood reader, so I'm trying to figure out what mood I'm actually in to read.
Yeah.
But yeah, the daily struggles of Someone who likes to read. So yeah, good that you're really that you're sort of. Are you reading any? Is that the main read at the moment, or?
Yeah, I started reading it like a little bit ago, and then I put it down, and I was like, I just can't get into it. But then I've just recently picked it back up, and I'm just going to try and stick with this one. I don't know.
Yeah, I've never been able to do multiple books at the same time. It's just I end up just doing one and then going back to others. So excellent. So for any listeners that don't know, the Books Last podcast challenges book lovers to pick the 5 books that they can take with them to a place where they're going to be cast away forever, and those are the only 5 books they can take with them and read forever and ever. So Angela, we tend to do a thing where you get to pick where you get cast away to. So if you want to go to a desert island, you're more than welcome to. But if there's another location you would like to go and hide away with your 5 books, where do you think that would be?
I thought about this. So I love kind of nature cottage type of idea. Although I do want it to have modern plumbing. I don't know. Sometimes when I picture little cottages in the middle of nowhere, I just imagine having to like pump my water and like pee in the woods. And I'm like, no, modern plumbing in it. and I was just like, it'd be wonderful if it was in like the middle of the woods and a beautiful like flower meadow kind of thing. But ideally, I would have magical powers. And I know this is not part of your prompt, but I'm just saying, I thought about it. I would have magical powers so that the way there'll be like no mosquitoes and bugs and things to attack me, and just nobody I'm not interested in. They can just keep it away.
Okay, so mosquito repellent magic powers.
Yes,
along with others. I mean, it's a really valid concern. We did I went to Scotland last year in the countryside, and they have so many like midges over there, and they're just everywhere, and they are more of a nuisance than a bug that size has any right to be. So smart choice. So a cottage in nature, preferably with magical powers. I mean, isn't that everyone's dream? Okay, so we've got your location. Why don't you tell us about the first book that you wish to take with you?
Okay. First, this was really hard to choose 5, but one is 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Yeah. Have you read that one, or do you like hate it or something?
Okay, no, I haven't read it, and I really, really want to, but it's really strange because I've seen 6 of Crows so much in social media, and I've wanted to read it forever because it just sounds like my kind of book. But I also saw something like a meme or something today that had like 2 identical things, and they were basically saying that 6 of Crows and the Gilded Wolves are exactly the same, and that's another book that I've also got on my bookshelf that I really, really want to read. So they're ones that, to be fair, that might have just decided what I'm going to read next. I might just read that next because it's been one of those that I've wanted to read for ages, but I've kind of been debating whether I should read is it the Grisha trilogy first, because I know that they're kind of part of the same world, but I didn't know which order to read it in, and I think I used that as an excuse to just not read it.
Yeah, people ask that all the time because they're like the same world but different countries, different characters kind of thing. I think there is like a character or whatever from the Grisha trilogy that has like a little short cameo in the second book of the 6 of Crows duology. They can be read in either order. I happened to read these books as they were published, so I had no choice. It wasn't written yet, so.
Well, what for anybody who doesn't know, and I mean they must not be on Twitter if they don't know what 6 of Crows is about, but for anyone or do they don't follow the right people, I suppose. For anyone who doesn't know what 6 of Crows is about, could you give us like a brief summary?
Sure. So it's a fantasy, 2 books. I sort of picture it taking place in like a 19th century Amsterdam type of city. And,
it's a vibe.
Yeah, right? It's just what I get when I read it. And it's 6 characters that you follow. They're teenagers. One is like a criminal gang leader, mastermind, and they're basically hired for a heist to break into this like most protected, impenetrable place ever. And if they do it, they get lots of money.
See, now this is why I know that it's a kind of book that I would really, really enjoy, because heists are just interesting, but also you bring in the element of fantasy heists, and it's just the next, like, even better. So one of my favorite series is a series by Scott Lynch, and one of the books in that series is, I mean, to be fair, all of the books are heist books because they're career criminals, but but one of them is like a full-on heist, getting things out of a safe in a tower, all kinds of defenses, long game kind of thing. And I just love the suspense of that sort of thing. So what is it about Six of Crows that really you just need to have that with you in your cottage in nature?
It's just one of those books that it sounded exactly like something I would love when I found out about it. And it was. And I think because it kind of alternates points of view in them. And so that makes it more interesting. There's magic. I don't know. I honestly can't pin it down, but it's like the whole aesthetic of it, I guess. And he's brilliant. Like Kaz is the criminal, gang leader or whatever. And he's such a morally gray character where he's not good, but he's not evil. And there's something about that I tend to be a sucker for in books.
See, the universe knew I didn't know what I was going to read next, and they've just sent you to basically tell me. Literally, if there's a Venn diagram of all the reasons why I love the books that I love, and then they all like eclipse into one area, sort of morally grey protagonist that people love despite everything, heists, fantasy, magic, that aesthetic. It's literally, it just sounds like it's all of those things. So I feel like I'm going to pick this up like immediately after this. But yeah, it's just one of those things. And I think books like that are very much, they've just got that kind of that mood. And if you love that, then I mean, it's always great when something sounds like something you're going to love and then you actually love it.
Yes. Because it's such a disappointment when you're like, oh, this sounds perfect. And then you pick it up and it wasn't exactly what you thought. Sometimes it can be a good surprise, but sometimes you're just left kind of feeling flat, like, and what I worry for this one is like, they've gotten so much hype. And now that they're making like a Netflix TV show of all these kind of books and stuff, they're getting so much hype. And I see people online that are like, oh, I'm going to read it. And then they're just like, didn't live up to the hype. Like I'm really glad I read them, I think, before that or whatever, because I had none of that to like skew my expectations, I guess, but I still think they're really good.
I try to really take any hype around any book with like a massive dose of like skepticism, because I feel like, and I mean, even though I manage my expectations going into some of these things, I still get caught out. I mean, recently, hopefully I don't upset anyone, but The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, I read it. So it's fine. It's a fine book. There's nothing wrong with the book. I did enjoy it when I read it, but everyone I followed on social media posted these videos of themselves sobbing, and it had, changed everything. And I mean, if it did for them, then that's really, really amazing. But I got to it's a 500-page book. I got to page 450, and I was like, I haven't even missed it over once at this book. Is it me? Am I the problem?
Yeah. No. I had the same reaction. Everyone loved it. Like, this was a life-changing book. Like, and I'm like, all right, sure. And I got the book and I was trying to read it and I had to put it down. Like, I kind of gave up and I was like, I think maybe I'm not in the right mood for it or something. And I tried it later and I don't know, maybe I need more time. I'm not quite getting that special something that I think other people are picking up on. And I would love to feel the same way about it, but not so much right now.
I mean, really, this is the feeling you should go into books with, isn't it? Because like I see a lot of people, especially sort of there's like almost a kind of trend to read something with the idea that you almost know you're not going to like it. And I go into all books like wanting to love all of them. Like I want to give everything sort of 5 stars, and it's kind of disappointing when that doesn't happen. Like I say, I mean, it still was, I think it was, I gave it like 4 stars when I reviewed it. It's still like a good book. I think I managed to get to the end of it just because I found the two, I suppose, I really hesitate towards calling them love interests because one of them is so problematic, like so problematic. But like the 2 quote unquote love interests are kind of my Achilles heel, because they're like the 2 stereotypical types of like love interests in books that I'm like, one of them I'm like, I really shouldn't find this enjoyable, but I do. And then the other one is just, your classic, just way too nice to exist in this world kind of guy. But yeah, it's good when things live up to the hype. Equally, I try to just ignore hype. Would you, I mean, a lot of people are excited about the Grisha Light Netflix series. Would you say, I mean, do you think a lot of people I hear say Six of Crows is better? They just think it's better than the original trilogy. Do you agree? Or
I do agree. I enjoyed the Grisha trilogy when I read them, but I will say, especially after reading so many books at this point in my life, they do fall a little more into the cookie cutter set of things. Like they're still good, it's just there's a lot of elements where you're like, I've read this before. And Six of Crows, I think, at least at the time, felt so fresh, or at least for me, like maybe I hadn't picked anything up like it, so it was just, I don't know, but it still had all the elements from the Grisha trilogy that I loved, so it was kind of like, it was fantastic.
Best of both worlds.
Yes, and I don't know how the show's gonna go. I'm kind of afraid to watch it. To be honest.
I think I always find it really funny when a spin-off kind of outshines the thing it spun off from.
Yeah.
Because there's everyone knows that one sort of series where the side character completely just steals the show and makes it impossible to really care about the main arc.
Like, get off the screen.
Yeah, so I mean, they may end doing Six of Crows, because I mean, I'm actually really enjoying this whole streaming thing that people do, because it means a lot of books that basically have been considered quote unquote not good enough for a movie are actually getting really thoughtful on-screen adaptions with like really great casting, because that Netflix and Disney Plus money. And although I think I've heard some controversy about some casting for this,
there's always
I mean, yeah, almost always controversy. And because I don't really know anything about the book series, and I don't know anything about the TV show because I've not followed it for that reason, I can't really comment on that. But like, I always get really I get excited when I see an on-screen adaptation being announced, and then I get kind of tired straight afterwards.
Yes. Yeah.
Just we're all hoping and praying that the casting for Percy Jackson is amazing. That's
right.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. All the other TV shows, I'm sure they'll be fine. Okay, so Six of Crows by Leigh. Is it Bardugo? Because I've never actually said her name out loud.
Bardugo.
Bardugo. Okay.
Or at least you didn't correct me when I said it. So.
Excellent. See, well, I mean, that's all the corroboration you need, really, isn't it? So we've got a sci-fi heist movie. Well, it could be a movie. One day, sci-fi heist book. Opening up the list. What book will be joining Six of Crows?
You might make fun of me for it. And
Never.
That's okay. But another book on my list is The Host by Stephanie Meyer.
Sorry, I really that's my favorite Stephanie Meyer book.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Like every time, it's really hit or miss when people are like, really? Or they love it. And I'm just like, you don't understand. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, for anybody who isn't aware, Stephanie Meyer does aliens far better than she does vampires and werewolves.
Yes.
I mean, I've read all of Twilight, but it's categorically a better book than Twilight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I mean, do you want to do a quick summary of the host for any? Because so many people haven't heard of it because it's sort of discounted on the basis of Twilight. Because if people don't like Twilight, they don't want to give the host a chance. So
Yeah, it's like what they don't like Twilight, so like anything else she writes is garbage, and I'm like,
yeah.
no. Okay, let me try. So yeah, this is sort of a sci-fi. I would almost call it a sci-fi romance, almost. I
Yeah,
guess.
definitely. Romance is like really big part of it, isn't it?
Major. Yeah. Okay. And it's aliens have basically overtaken Earth by they use human bodies as their hosts, just creepy. And there is the main character, where the human has not been suppressed, I guess, in the mind.
Yeah.
So there's two voices in their head. So there's the alien and the human, and they basically end up going off, and I'm trying not to spoil things. I don't know. They basically go off and they come across a human colony, and it has humans that are hiding, and they're some of the main characters' human bodies. Family, but inside of her is an alien, so they're like, oh, our family member is dead, and she has to try and convince them that she's still in the head. I don't know, it's kind of complicated, for me to explain. Maybe you should have done it.
No, I think you did a really good job. It's exactly what you say.
yeah, it was like, it was such a good book because I love the romance in it. It's slow burn but wonderful. And I love the show, like the interplay of aliens versus humans and having to learn from each other, I guess, or at least in this little secluded area.
Sorry, I'm having all of these because I'm remembering it now that we're talking about it. And the love interest in it, the slow burn romance in it is like one of my favorite characters.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And I mean, it made a big impact on me because I read it because of Twilight, because Twilight was one of the earlier series I read. So I kind of cut my teeth on Percy Jackson. And then, to be fair, I didn't go straight to Harry Potter, which most people my age did at the time. I ended up going to Twilight because I think my nan bought me all the books from a Scholastic fair. So I was in like my school library, and the host was in my school library, and I borrowed it to read that because it was by Stephanie Meyer. And yeah, I just remember I've got like really vivid memories of sitting in the school gym reading like a really intense part, because there's some parts of it that are like so much suspense, where you just don't know what's going to happen. And I was like, sort of really, I think I must have been 13 or something like that. I was really, really intensely invested in what was happening in my book. And I was with like a group of friends, and they're like, what is going on? I'm like, you don't understand how important it is. And I think that was one of the books that I got in trouble for reading during lessons and all of that sort of thing, because I just read non-school books in all of my lessons. But it's so good. The film is not great, but the book is good.
Yes, the book. It's a long book too. It's a big book, but it's worth it. At least, it's just I don't feel the time. Like, some big books you can tell, like, you kind of feel it dragging. And at least for me, when I read The Host, I'm completely fine reading a huge book. Like, I'm there for every minute.
Yeah, the whole way through. I think The Host may be one of the few universes I've actually read fan fiction for. Okay. Like, it's one of the few that when I was young, I actually actively sought out fan fiction, because I didn't for very much stuff. I think it was that, and maybe I feel like Harry Potter, and I think maybe some Marvel stuff. But anyway, it was definitely it probably still is one of my favorites. And there is like there's like a stepping up of the maturity of like Stephanie Meyer's writing in the book. Not to like, it's not like I think she said it herself. So and she sort of agrees with that. And it's such a different tone to Twilight, which was why I was so devastated when the movie had such amazing casting and yet somehow turned out to be bad. Saoirse Ronan is a national treasure. Yes. Why can no one put her in like, she's been so good in everything I've seen her in.
Absolutely. I just don't understand.
Yeah, she's so amazing in it, and the casting in that is really good. I think Max Irons, I think that's Scar's son is in it. So Scar, the guy who voices Scar in Lion King, his son is in that film.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Yeah, and Luke from Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Just amazing casting, but not a film that worked out. And for the life of me, I can't quite understand why, because they actually stuck pretty closely to the book.
They did. Okay, so I watched the movie a little while ago, not too long ago actually. But something I noticed is like, and maybe it's because it's such a big book and the slow burn is really important to it. Like in the book, I felt like I understood the time it took for the relationships to develop, whether romantic or platonic or whatever. And in the movie, it felt very rushed. Like it almost turned a slow burn romance into an insta love, which is odd because in one moment I hate you and I want you to die, and all of a sudden the next moment you're like, you know what? You're pretty cool. And I'm like, excuse me. And it kind of lost. And even her like becoming friends with the other humans and stuff, like I felt like some of that was really lost, and it was just either they just didn't like her and they never bothered trying to get into that, or they suddenly liked her. I don't know. It was like they tried to really cram it in, but the moments they chose, I don't know. I think it was in the writing where they really needed to focus more on the relationships than the like pizzazz.
Yeah, I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, because a lot of the tension and storytelling is definitely told through like so the main characters are called Wanda and Melanie. It's very much like in their internal struggle, and it is internal, and you kind of experience it differently reading it than I suppose you do watching it. Aesthetically, and really, like, I was really impressed with how they kind of brought the world to life on screen, and I actually really liked the soundtrack for that film as well. I think it was one of those things, like, I just couldn't understand why it had all these good components. It was really, and it just didn't end up working. And worse than that, so my very best friend, I have actually think I've told this story on the podcast before, but my very best friend, she now no longer trusts my judgment in movies because I made her pay for a ticket to go and see this with me. She'd never read the book. She had no experience of the story. I said, it's going to be amazing. Look at the casting. I mean, Jake Abel is right there. And it didn't pan out that way. And it's forever tarnished my view. But yeah, it's a shame. But yeah, The Host is a really, really great story. And I wanted a sequel so badly, and now I've just decided, and now I've read Midnight Sun and I've decided I definitely don't want a sequel.
Yeah, because they leave like the littlest bit, at the very end in case there is a sequel. And I thought, I could be completely wrong, I thought I saw something on social media, so I mean, take that with a grain of salt, about there being a sequel, like eventually or something. But yeah, like you, I'm okay with that one.
Yeah, I think she hinted at it on her blog, and I mean, I think she's hinted at it recently, and I suppose she seems like she's wanting to dip into old projects, because for the most part Stephanie Meyer has actually, I mean, she's rewritten the first Twilight book like 5 different times from different perspectives with different characters. So part of me doesn't want her to go near The Host, because it is just fine as it is as a great standalone sci-fi book. But also the part of me that is a consumerist and will throw my money at anything that I like the sound of kind of wouldn't mind the first book from a different perspective as well. So
I'll definitely still read it if it happens.
Yeah,
but
that's the part where sometimes I'm like, no, I'm principled with who I like, what books I buy and what I choose to read. And then Stephanie Meyer announced that she was releasing the full book of Midnight Sun, and I hit pre-order far too fast.
Same.
And it just, and I was just like, well, we're not perfect. We're human.
We are.
Okay. That's amazing. Sorry, I'm so glad I found someone else who read it, because most people I know have never read it, and then the people I know who sort of have heard of it won't read it because they don't like Twilight. So this is a shame. Okay, so I'm loving this list so far. It's amazing. What is the third book that you want to join?
Okay, this one is a little less known, which is upsetting to me, but whatever. It's called Children of Icarus by Caighlan Smith. And I feel like I should go ahead and warn the world. It's a trilogy, but because of but it's a business, and because I guess the first two books didn't sell enough, they decided not to publish the last book. So I have actually talked to the author, and she intends on publishing it. It's just a matter of negotiating contract stuff. But I'm holding on for it because honestly, I'm just really into these books. Don't really know anyone else who's read them, but I love them.
We need to start a campaign to get everybody reading the first two books so that a publisher buys the third one. That's really upset. Oh no! I've never heard of these books, but I'm immediately upset by the fact that the trilogy is incomplete because of this.
Yes, yeah, it's just cruel.
Yeah, you can't do that. That's the thing. Okay, so Children of Icarus. Greek mythology nod.
Yes.
What is the Children of Icarus about?
Okay, it's like a Greek myth inspired sort of dystopian horror. And it's kind of okay. So basically each year it's like an annual big celebration, and a few kids are chosen. It's like a huge honor, and they're dressed as angels or something. And
isn't it always a huge honor when young kids are picked in a dystopia?
always. But like they're brought into this huge maze, and like there's like it's a walled city kind of thing, and they're let out into this maze. And I can't quite remember specifically what their whole supposed lore is for this honor. But the point is it's a total lie. So they're in this maze, and you have to basically survive. So
it's like Hunger Games meets Maze Runner, but Greek mythology.
Yeah, it has like little elements of all those things. And there's monsters in there, and then there's like survivors, and you kind of figure out the truth-ish. And that's what's really upsetting, is because you find out like no one knows where this whole thing started, basically, besides the supposed lore, which is baloney. And so at the end of book 2, we stumble across a big something, and I'm forever waiting. It's so upsetting, but they're still worth reading. Like, don't not read them.
So that's basically like the last chapter of Game of Thrones before the TV show came out.
Yeah, like but I will say it's the main character is interesting because you never, at least for 2 books, you don't know her name. And in the first book, she like takes on someone else's identity to survive, and you just never know her name, because why would she say her name to herself, I guess. And so of course that's one of the curiosities that are driving me nuts. But and in the first book, the character growth between the 2 books is wild. Just like from where she starts to where she goes, and it's there's so much to it I really love.
It sounds amazing, and it's kind of, with the whole maze, that's kind of a theme that is on a lot of, well, it's Greek mythology, because if you think the labyrinth and the monsters and everything that you have to fight, everything that the heroes have to fight, and that sounds really, really interesting. And it's not one I've heard of. I'm really because when these sort of dystopians became super popular when I started reading quite a lot, and we went through this sort of renaissance of dystopia, and it was this huge deal. And I think we've moved out of dystopia now, and now we're more into, I want to say, like fae and and kind of high fantasy, but not high fantasy seems to be the most recent trend, but that also seems to be patterning out. I don't know what the next big thing in YA is going to be.
Yeah, I don't know. Like for a while too, it was like fairy tale retellings or something.
Yeah, fairy tale retellings was a big one with all of them. So many, so many.
You see the little trends going.
Yeah, but that sounds really thing. Is there? I mean, you clearly really love it. I mean, and you've been able to speak to the author, which is really awesome as well. Was there something about maybe the way, I mean, how did you find the books? Did you just sort of stumble across them?
Yeah. Well, the first book I actually stumbled across and got an advanced copy for, like, to review. And I was just like, sure, it sounds kind of interesting, I guess. And then I read it and I was really upset because I had to wait extra long for that book to come out. And then the next book, but yeah, I just kind of stumbled across it that way. And I just, in my head, I was like, everyone's going to read it. And then no one's heard of it. And I'm like, never mind.
Yeah, it's always really strange when that happens, because I mean, I wish I was still the kind of good reader that read stuff when it gets released, because I used to be the kind of reader who would pre-order all of the sequels to the series that I was reading, and then I would read them as soon as they came out, and then that stopped somewhere. But yeah, it sounds really, really interesting, and it's a shame that, like, I mean, it didn't really take. It's always really disappointing when you find like a series that you feel like should have a bigger fan base. Mm-hmm. Like for me, The Gentleman Bastard sequence by Scott Lynch, I know a lot of people do love it, but it's not enough people for how good the book series is. And I have managed to find people who enjoy it, but it's literally through Twitter, and it's through searching the actual series in Twitter to find people who are also interested in it. But I was really curious as to see what the cover for the books look like. And I had it does look very cool. Right. Yes, it looks very, very cool. So I mean, you've had a couple series in this one. Is it just the first books in both of the series that you're wanting to take?
I mean, obviously in an ideal world, I would have all of them. But I'm okay if I just have the first one, only because I've at least read the other one.
Right. You're working on your smuggling skills to see if you can somehow wrangle the other two in. So we've got, I mean, kind of mainly fantasy, but like different contingents of fantasy, which is really interesting, like different subgenres in that. Is that a trend for the rest of your list, or are we diverging on themes?
Now that I'm looking at it, I think the dystopian aspect continues. Seems to be something I'm a sucker for.
Always good. I mean, I think when you find a genre that you really like, it's just, I mean, there's nothing wrong with shopping in that genre. And a dystopian is really interesting because I always find you get really interesting sort of, I don't know, social commentary in a dystopian novel, just about sort of law and kind of I mean, that's the one thing that I always got with Hunger Games was there's like a very political aspect, but also class and all of that sort of thing that it all gets dissected through it. Yeah. So dystopian is really interesting. I also like when you read your literary dystopian, like Brave New World and all of that sort of thing. I just find it really, really interesting. It is a really interesting genre. I haven't read one in a while. I think it's been a while. I kind of burnt myself out on dystopians, and I think
I've done that before.
Yeah, I think I finished. I think I read the Matched trilogy by Ali Condé.
Those.
And I think I got to the end of those, and they're great. Well, them, and then the Delirium trilogy by Lauren Olivier, and I just did, or Oliver. However she pronounces it, one of those. But I think I read one too many dystopian trilogies, and whilst there was nothing wrong with those trilogies by themselves, I think I'd got to about 5 trilogies when I was like, you know what? what was it? Legend by Mary Lou, which is also amazing, and she's releasing another book for that one, which I need to read because I need to know what happens to Daniel and June. It's been so many years, but I still need to know what happens to them. Okay, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. What is the fourth book that is joining your list?
Dystopian, but in a paranormal vein. It's The Immortal Rules by Julie Kagawa. Wait, what's her name? Hang on, I have the book here. Julie Kagawa. Oh gosh, I don't know. Is that how you say it? I have no idea.
I don't know how you say it, but she does write Shadow of the Fox, which was one of my favorite books that I read. I think it was the year before last, and I've been meaning to check out some of her other stuff.
I haven't read that one, so I need to read that.
It's so good. It's like The Wizard of Oz, but with Japanese mythology.
Yes. Okay.
Well,
yes.
Japanese folklore. It's I love it. In fact, actually, I have got the sequels that are also on my list of stuff I really want to read soon. But yeah, no. But we're not talking about Shadow of the Fox. We're talking about the Immortal Rules.
Yeah. So that's like I said, sort of paranormal dystopia thingamajiggy, where vampires are in control, and can't
be worse than reality.
And the main character ends up becoming a vampire, but also escapes the city, and she ends up kind of with a traveling group of human survivors, I guess, that are in the wilderness. And so she has to deal with being a newborn vampire and also trying to keep that fact a secret from the humans who hate vampires. And of course, there's a romance.
Obviously.
Obviously.
Sorry, I can't say the word obviously without thinking about Snape. But yes. Just that moment is I mean, it sounds really, and it's actually not a vampire story I've heard before, because all the vampire stories I've read are vampires in hiding.
Yeah, exactly.
Mostly. Yeah. So having them be in control, is the entire city vampires, or is the entire city humans ruled by vampires?
There's like humans, but there's like the vampires have all the money kind of thing and run the city, and then the humans are like in the slums, and you have to give blood donations and that kind of thing.
So they've set themselves up an economy.
Yeah,
Smart. Why not? I hadn't read anything vampire related since Twilight, which I read years and years and years ago, until I read The Beautiful by Renée recently, which is so good. It's so good, and it's kind of brought on this sort of it's reawoken vampires as a genre for me, because for me it had wrongly probably been entirely grouped with Twilight and I know Twilight is such a niche and unique take on the vampire legend.
Yes.
And most people don't tend to go for that kind of reading, it is a really interesting genre. Have you found that you've read a lot of vampire kind of novels, or is this sort of unusual for your reading?
It's not the most common thing I read, but it's not uncommon. I've become okay. Like, there was a while after Twilight where I just didn't do any vampires. And then I've gotten back into it. So now if there's like a book and it says vampires, I'm like, yeah, all right, let's try it.
Well, we're open to the idea. I mean, I'm kind of in that mindset now, but I sort of point blank refuse to read Pride, Prejudice and Vampires because it was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, isn't it? No, zombies, not vampires. Also, I don't read zombies very often.
I don't really read zombies.
Yeah. Vampires are an interesting one though. So I mean, is it a series, The Immortal?
It's a trilogy.
Ooh.
And I mean, with like most series, the first book's always my favorite. Maybe it's just like your introduction to the world. I don't know. Just usually my favorite.
It's usually the one where everything's nicest, especially if the book is in a series. things go wrong, but they like go wrong in the smallest amount they go wrong in the entire series, because the crisis just tends to escalate with every book, and it just gets worse. So you tend to look on it with like fond memories. I think one of the only series where that's not my favorite. The first one isn't my favorite. It's probably Harry Potter, because my favorite is the one where Voldemort isn't in it at all. And I think it's for a similar reason. I just kind of have rose-tinted spectacles for it. So some people listening might have some kind of certain ideas about what a female protagonist might be like in a vampire film. How does this female protagonist stack up? Is she doesn't faint at the sight of blood, does she?
No. She has a mentor, vampire mentor at first, before she has to run away, kind of thing. And he sort of tries to prepare her a little bit. And he gives her a katana. Ooh. So, which is pretty dope, I think. Not a common weapon, at least from most books that I read. So she has this like katana strapped to her back, and she's just ready. So it's like a bit of a survival story, and I kind of like that feel to it. Yeah. Especially with the humans that are trying to live in the woods, and they're trying to go. I think there's supposed to be some sort of human-run city that they're trying to find, like an Eden kind of thing. So I think they're trying to travel for that.
Speaking as someone who lives in a country run by humans, I think they've got high expectations.
I know. Same. I'm like,
I mean, blood donations aside, everyone should donate blood. I feel like the Vampire City probably doesn't actually sound that bad. We advocate for donating blood, and it saves lives or feeds vampires. I mean, really, what's the difference? So, I mean, that sounds really it sounds really cool. And I mean, the idea of like vampires needing weapons at all is interesting. Although I suppose if I was a vampire and I wanted to disguise myself as a human, I would probably have a weapon to sort of say, I can't be a vampire. I have this really cool sword. Obviously. Right. So, I mean, definitely exploring all of the sort of offshoots of dystopian fantasy, which I love, because I mean it is a very diverse genre. It's not all Hunger Games. So we have got 4 really, really cool, exciting choices. What is the 5th and final book joining you in your cottage?
I figured I'd throw in an indie author, and this one is called Alarum by Talis Jones, and it's I don't know what it is. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic dystopian survival story type of thing. I think it's probably the type of book you'll either like it or not like it, maybe. There's just those books.
Yeah.
Where you either love it, or there's people that are like, eh.
Yeah, it's a Marmite kind of book. Yeah.
I mean, I liked it. But it like follows a I guess protagonist. She's she's good, but struggles to remain good, I guess, kind of thing, because it's kind of a sort of apocalyptic-ish dystopian society she's been thrown into.
Relatable. We all struggle. We all struggle sometimes.
Yeah, it's 2020. Just look at everybody.
Yeah.
But and so it kind of just follows her journey, I guess, of and it has so it uses flashbacks, I guess, to show how things started and whatever, and she meets different people along the way. So it's a bit of a survival type of story. Rather than
I'm sorry, go on.
Oh no, I was just saying, rather than a more straightforward this is the villain and this is the good person, it's not super straightforward like that, I guess.
Oh right, so it's not it's not adversarial, this is the bad guy, this is what we need to do. That's really interesting, because it's very easy for, I suppose that is the default, everyone expects a villain. Is it a spoiler for you to tell us maybe how the world ended in this particular world? Maybe give us some more ideas, just in case, so more stuff to keep our eye out for.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. Okay, it's not super clear, and it's interesting. So there's more books in the series, but they're each standalones, sort of ish. Like they're linked, but they each feature a different main character. And then as they go, they kind of link up more.
Oh,
kind of. I know it's different.
And that's really interesting.
So this one just focuses more on this person, and so she doesn't know exactly what happened. You just see certain flashbacks because she was like 5 or something. So she doesn't, as a 5-year-old, she's like, "Ooh, people are upset," that kind of thing. And I will say, like, as the books as you read more books, you find out more about how it started, I guess. So I don't super know what happened, but it's something. I will say there's sort of a paranormal element to it, or sci-fi element, I guess maybe, is because certain people have like powers, and it has something to do with what caused this kind of break in society.
That sounds really interesting. It sounds, I mean, powers always make things a little bit more interesting, and it sounds not a series I've read, but it sounds like the Gone series by, I want to say his name's Michael Grant. Post-apocalyptic stuff is kind of interesting, and again, it's just another sort of contingent of like dystopian, and that sort of thing. And it's interesting that it follows all different characters as opposed to doing sort of points of view. But
yeah,
that's kind of interesting because that is definitely a sort of style of writing I have grown more to associate with like romance novels, specifically Kindle romance novels that explores one specific group of friends, and then it does one book that can be read as a standalone from all of their point of view.
Like those romance ones where they go through the like werewolf pack and each one gets mated in each book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, literally. And it's like those 15 book series that are on Kindles and stuff. To be fair, I say that but it's interesting to see that sort of applied to a different genre. So that sounds really cool as well. Does it give you a timeline? As like, do we have like made up years for when it might happen?
No, they don't really specify, but I will say, like, I've noticed there's things that are familiar. So there's little things that are familiar, I guess.
That's good, because I mean, dystopian is always, I think it always hits home a little bit more if you can recognize parts of the world you're in that world. Otherwise, it just kind of feels like it's just happening in a completely different,
like a different world, like
planet.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds like a really awesome choice to round out a really great list. Would you mind, for the benefit of the listener, just giving us a quick run through of all 5 of your book choices, and then we can do any ones that almost made the cut but didn't quite.
Okay, let me remember. 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, The Host by Stephanie Meyer, Children of Icarus by Caighlan Smith, The Immortal Rules by Julie Kagawa, and Alarum by Talis Jones. I think those are all 5.
Yes, all great worthy choices. Were there any that they were just scrapping to get on that top 5 spot but didn't quite make it?
I mean, a million, but I guess for the sake of time, I won't list all of those. Okay, I'll do 2. One, which I think won't be surprising to a lot of people, is Harry Potter. And it's just because an honorable mention, I'm not going to choose just one. I love Harry Potter. I'm sorry. It was my childhood. I grew up with it.
Yeah, it was such a formative part of, like, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, especially I think America, I mean, all over the world, but like America and the UK, and I just I mean, I couldn't go like a month without one of the films being shown on TV. And that sort of thing. But the books are really, really fun. I suppose your excuse can be that you don't have 7 spots, so you can't possibly take all 7 of them. So
yeah, because anyway, I still love those books. And then my other one is another indie author, and it's Off Planet by Aileen Erin. And that is another sort of dystopian, almost apocalyptic, but not really. Anyway, type of series, sci-fi series. And that's where like it's a kind of a different twist, because in that, and there's a romance, of course.
Of course.
So in that, there's aliens on other planets, and humans know that. And they have an alliance. So some of them live on Earth. They're like, yeah, we live here. That's fine. But this big evil human corporation wants to take over and basically pins it on the aliens, and then they're being massacred and get out. And so the main character is like a survivor, but she has to hide that she's half alien or whatever, kind of thing. And
I wish I could say humanity would never do that, but
yeah, it's like you read it and you don't once question, like, what, the humans?
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like that definitely sounds like a corporation that's probably run by the UK government. Like, why just yeah, no, sounds about right.
Makes sense. That was just really good.
So we've got Off Planet and Harry Potter, as well as a million other books, but you can't possibly choose. Well, if anybody was interested in maybe finding out what those other million books that you love might be, where could they find you on the internet so that they could maybe figure out what some of those are and check them out as well?
The main place you can find me and all my books that I love, or not so much, is my blog, which is pooledink.com. And it has all my social media links on there. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Goodreads. You're welcome to follow me. You're welcome to send me book recommendations.
I feel like I've got a lot of book recommendations for you after this conversation. It sounds like we've got a lot of reading taste in common. So I have some books that I think I'm going to send you. Well, listeners, thank you so much for listening, and Angela, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun and such a cool discussion. If you want to follow the podcast on social media, we are at Books to Last Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, because I can't fit podcast on for Twitter and I wanted them all to match. So yeah, at Books to Last Pod. And if you wanted to check out any of our other episodes, we're now on all of the major podcast providers, which is exciting to be able to say. So yeah, thank you for listening, and Angela, thank you again so much for joining us, and until next time, thank you for listening, folks. Bye.